Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about Zhask, one of the most annoying mage in the game. In this video, I will also cover everything you need to know about Zhask, including his passive, skills, builds, emblems, and combos. Plus I will also share some tips and guides on how to use him effectively in a match. So, without further ado, let's get started with the video. Zhask has remained as one of the most annoying mage in the game, and if you have ever faced him in a match, you will definitely find it hard to play against him. And despite being considered as one of the most annoying hero, he can still deal a huge amount of damage. And he is a nightmare for heroes without dash abilities. But mastering Zhask is no easy task, especially if you have never used him before. So, in order to master Zhask, you must first understand how his skills and passive work. So let's start with his first skill, and after that, I will then explain his passive. With the help of his first skill, Zhask summons a nightmaric spawn in the designated location. The nightmaric spawn cannot move from its summoned location, but it will automatically attack nearby enemies by firing a death ray at them, dealing 60 magic damage, and also slowing them by 30% for 0.6 seconds. The nightmaric spawn inherits 50% of Zhask's attributes, and the death ray attack from the nightmaric spawn is considered as a basic attack. But even though the death ray is considered as a basic attack, it cannot deal critical damage. And there is an error or bug with his first skill, and because of that, the nightmaric spawn will benefit twice from the unique passive of Holy Crystal. Which pretty much means that buying Holy Crystal will greatly increase the damage of the nightmaric spawn. This skill is your main source of damage, so make sure to max out this skill first. And since the nightmaric spawn has a long range, you can use it to poke the enemies by placing it near them. And you can also use this skill to check the bushes, allowing you to avoid being ambushed by the enemies. So always make sure to keep that in mind before you enter a bush, as you never know if the enemies are camping in the bush, waiting to ambush you. Now, let's talk about his passive. With the help of his passive, whenever you get killed, a nightmaric spawn will be summoned on the place you died. And unlike his first skill, the nightmaric spawn from his passive inherits 100% of Zhask's attributes. Which means the spawn which gets summoned once you die is stronger than your first skill. And if you find yourself on the brink of death with no escape route, positioning yourself near the carry or any enemies with low HP can help you secure a kill. Now, let's talk about his second skill. With the help of his second skill, Zhask fires a penetrating psychic beam in the designated direction, dealing 300 magic damage to enemies along the way. And if your nightmaric spawn hits the same enemy right after you use this skill, they will get stunned for 0.5 seconds. This skill is your main source of CC. And remember, the enemies will get stunned only if the spawn hits them, so make sure to use your first skill before using this skill, so that you will be able to stun the enemies. Now, let's talk about his third skill. With the help of his third skill, Zhask releases a swarm of hive clones in the targeted direction. The clones will explode and deal 55 magic damage to enemies on contact, reducing their movement speed by 80% for 1 second. And if this skill does not hit anyone, it will remain buried in the ground as a trap. This makes it a great skill for surprising enemies in bushes and mounting an ambush when ganking other lanes. Now, let's talk about his ultimate skill. With the help of his ultimate skill, Zhask combines himself with the nightmaric spawn, greatly increasing its attributes while enhancing his skills. And in your ultimate state, Zhask hides inside the spawn, and becomes untargetable during his ultimate state. And during this state, you can use your first skill to blink into a different location. And if you use your ultimate again, Zhask will jump out of the spawn. This skill is what makes Zhask so annoying and hard to kill, as he can easily hide inside the spawn by using his ultimate, making him untargetable. And not to mention the amount of damage he can deal during this stage, as you can instantly melt the enemies during your ultimate form. And in your ultimate form, your second skill also gets enhanced, and using it on an enemy will stun them. And not only that, his enhanced second skill also deals a lot of damage. So whenever you use your ultimate, always make sure to immediately use your second skill to stun the enemies. And after using your second skill, wait for the enemies to use their dash abilities. And once they finish using their escape abilities, you can use your first skill to blink and reposition yourself near the enemy, increasing your chances of successfully killing the enemy. Remember, there will be times when you won't be able to stun the enemies, and it's okay even if you use your ultimate without stunning the enemies. But remember, timing is really important when using his ultimate, as using it on the wrong time will allow the enemies to easily escape from your ultimate. So always make sure to wait for the enemies to use up their skills before using your ultimate, so that they won't be able to escape. Now, before I talk about his builds and emblems, here are some fun facts about Zhask. As we all know, Zhask is considered as a villain in the Land of Dawn, and his main goal is to conquer and devour the universe. But before he was able to accomplish his plan, Eve was sent to put a stop to Zhask's evil plan. And even though Eve eliminated most of the swarms, Zhask always managed to escape from her. And while escaping from Eve, Zhask managed to come across the Land of Dawn. And in the Land of Dawn, Aurora and his lover Tobias fought against Zhask, defending their land against Zhask. And Zhask is also the first hero to have more than 3 abilities. And his first skill Nightmaric Spawn is named Domori. And because of his first skill, Zhask is known as the hero with the power of 2 heroes. Now, let's talk about his builds and emblems. Zhask recently got an adjustment on his first and ultimate skill, and now, you don't need to go for attack speed items. Meaning you can fully focus on items that will increase your overall magic damage. And for that, this is the recommended build for him. This build will allow you to burst down the enemies within a few seconds, and I'd recommend you to use this build when playing against squishy enemies. But if you're playing against tanky enemies, then I'd recommend you to go for this build. This build will allow you to melt tanky enemies, increasing your killing potential, and allowing you to dominate over the enemies. Now, let's talk about his emblems and talents. For his emblem, I'd recommend you to go for the Mage emblem, as the Mage emblem is the most suitable emblem for him. And for his first talent, go for Rapture. Rapture will provide you with +5 adaptive penetration. And for his second talent, go for Weapon Master. Weapon Master will increase the magic power you gain from items, emblems, and skills by 5%, increasing your overall damage potential. And for his core talent, go for Impure Rage. Impure Rage will increase the damage of your skills, and it will also restore 2% of your mana when hitting an enemy with your skill. And Impure Rage is quite useful as Zhask consumes a lot of mana. Now, let's talk about his gameplay and how to use him in a match. During the early game, make sure to unlock your first skill, as your first skill is your main source of damage. And once the first wave of minions arrive, try to place your first skill near the enemy hero. Since his first skill prioritizes enemy heroes over the minions, so your first skill will constantly be poking the enemy's mage, all while you can easily last hit the minions. And this way, the enemy mage will have a hard time farming. But remember, your goal during the early game should only be poking the enemy with your first skill, as you never know if the enemy's team is rotating towards you, since there are bushes in both sides of the mid lane, so it will be hard to know whether the enemies are hiding in the bush or not. Remember, getting an early kill will greatly increase your farm, but dying in the early game will also decrease your farm and level by a lot. So unless you are sure that you can kill the enemy without getting killed, then you can take the risk. So, your early game priorities should be poking the enemy, farming, and reaching level 4 as soon as possible. And once you reach level 4, I'd recommend you to start rotating to the side lanes, as successfully ganking the enemies will benefit both you and your side laner. Now, let's talk about his mid-game. During the mid-game, you should have at least 1 or 2 of your core items, and this is the stage where Zhask starts to hurt like crazy. And in order to take advantage of that, you must constantly gank the side lanes, all while farming in between. But although Zhask can deal a good amount of damage, he is still a mage, and he is very weak to burst damage. And he is also weak without his ultimate, so make sure to play safe while your ultimate is on cooldown. And I'd recommend you to use your ultimate wisely, as you can also use it to protect yourself from ambushes. And unlike other mages, Zhask can use his first skill and he can push the turrets quite fast, so make sure to also take advantage of that by pushing whenever possible. And remember, Zhask is weak against heroes like Eudora, Helker, and Akai. And his ultimate can also be countered by heroes with multiple dash abilities, so always make sure to keep that in mind, and play carefully against those heroes when using Zhask. Now, let's talk about his late game. During the late game, Zhask is an absolute unit, and he can deal an insane amount of damage once he gets his full build. And what makes him so special is his ability to attack the backline of the enemies using his ultimate. So always make sure to keep that in mind, and try to take advantage of that during a teamfight. Remember, whenever there is a teamfight, make sure to always wait a few seconds before using your ultimate. Your goal should be targeting the enemy's mage and marksman. Since both mage and marksman are usually behind their tank, make sure to wait for their tank to get distracted. And after a few seconds, you can use your ultimate near the enemy's mage or marksman. And at this point in the game, you should easily be able to melt them without any problem. And also, keep in mind that timing and positioning is the key to winning during the late game. So always make sure to wait for the perfect timing before using your ultimate. So, what do you think about Zhask? Make sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments, and consider leaving a like on the video. And subscribe to my channel if you're new. I make tutorials and informative videos about the game. You guys motivate me to make better videos. Thank you for watching.